I'm 27, and 2 weeks ago, I got married. I planned and organized the entire wedding myself, and the guests couldn't stop talking about how beautiful and perfect everything was. It felt amazing to hear that. But my stepsister, who's 26, couldn't handle it. She went around telling everyone that I stole her ideas. She has always been jealous of me, so honestly, I wasn't surprised, but it still hurt. Some relatives even asked me if it was true, which was completely unfair because I definitely didn't do that. My stepsister has been making up lies about me for years just to make herself look better in comparison. I've had enough. When I was 16, my mom remarried, and ever since, my stepsister and I couldn't stand each other. At first, I tried to be friends with her, but she never wanted that. Instead, she turned everything into a competition, which drove me insane. Once, she spread a rumor in school that I was hitting on her boyfriend after I made the cheerleading team. For almost a month, most of the girls hated me and laughed behind my back, except for a few. That's the kind of person she is. For years, I let her behavior slide, knowing that she was just trying to get a reaction out of me. If I ignored her, she wouldn't win. But when it came to my wedding, I couldn't let it go. I had spent weeks planning everything, and she had no right to just waltz in and ruin it by spreading lies. I knew it was petty, but the moment I found out she was telling people I stole her ideas, I called her. I told her to stop lying, but she just laughed in my face, called me an oversensitive loser, and hung up. So, I decided to expose her and her husband in front of our entire family. For context, her husband, who's 30, used to be my boyfriend. When I was 23, I was still living with my parents and stepsister while saving up to move out. I met my ex at work and fell for him almost immediately, but he insisted on keeping our relationship a secret. He wouldn't let me tell anyone outside of work, which should have been a massive red flag. After 2 months of dating, I decided to introduce him to my parents, which, of course, meant introducing him to my stepsister. I didn't notice it at the time, but she was acting overly sweet and flirty with him. I would never have imagined that he'd cheat on me with her. That must have been when they started texting behind my back. Meanwhile, I was completely clueless, still dating him and falling more in love every day. After almost a year together, I knew I wanted to marry him. I didn't want to wait for him to propose, so I took the leap myself. I booked a fancy restaurant, and at the end of the night, I got down on one knee. He told me he needed time to think. Looking back, I wish he had just broken up with me right then. But instead, he strung me along for another 3 months, cheating on me with my stepsister the entire time. I was devastated when he rejected my proposal, but I stayed with him, hoping I could change his mind. 3 months later, he finally ended things, saying he was in love with my stepsister and wanted to be with her. And as if that wasn't enough, he told me she was 3 months pregnant. She was going to start showing soon, so they needed to get married as quickly as possible. I completely lost it. I had a massive fight with her, but my parents stepped in and forbade me from saying anything, worried that a scandal would ruin the family's reputation. My stepfather was well known in the community, and since I still lived with them at the time, I had no choice but to stay quiet. Their wedding was a small, simple ceremony in our parents' backyard, with just a few close friends and relatives. She moved in with him afterward. Of course, I didn't attend. I spent the entire week before their wedding holed up in a cheap motel, drinking and eating my feelings. A few weeks later, I finally had enough money to move into my own place, but that did nothing to fix my mental state. I fell into a deep depression. All I did was eat, drink, and sleep. I even quit my job because I couldn't bring myself to get out of bed. The only person who stuck around for me was my now husband. We had been close friends since high school, but I never saw him as anything more because he had always been the class clown. In the weeks following my stepsister's wedding, I skipped every party and ignored all my calls and messages. I thought my friends would just forget about me since they all had their own lives. But he didn't forget. He was the only one who tracked me down through my parents and showed up at my door. He took care of me for weeks. No matter how cold or distant I was, he never left my side. He helped me get back to my normal life. Hell, he even paid my bills because I was completely broke after quitting my job. I literally owe him my life and will always be grateful for everything he did for me. A few weeks in, I finally told him everything about my ex, my stepsister, all of it. He comforted me, but we never officially became a couple. He just moved in one day, and that was that. We never needed to talk about it. Even now, we joke about how he never even asked me out. It just happened. And that's when I decided it was time for the rest of the family to hear the truth. I talked it over with my husband first, and he fully supported me. He told me that after everything I had been through, it was only fair that I wanted to set the record straight. So, a couple of days ago, I invited the whole family to my house. I called my stepsister, using the sweetest tone possible so she wouldn't suspect a thing, and she fell for it completely. When everyone was gathered, I started by bringing up how she had accused me of stealing her wedding ideas. Then I reminded her that she didn't even have a real wedding, considering the circumstances under which she got married. A few people chuckled awkwardly, some looked uncomfortable, and others were just confused. But I wasn't done. I said that if she was going to accuse me of stealing her wedding ideas, maybe I should tell everyone about what she stole from me. Because, after all, she had actually stolen my fiancé. That was when the room fell silent. There were gasps, stunned faces, and then, my parents' expressions turned to pure shock. My ex turned bright red. I told the whole story. The guests looked like they had just been served a year's worth of gossip on a silver platter. When I finished, the silence stretched for an entire minute. Then, my stepsister jumped up and ran out of the house. Her husband bolted after her. One by one, the guests started leaving, most of them without saying a word. The last to go were my parents, who were absolutely furious. They actually had the nerve to demand that I apologize to my stepsister for humiliating her in front of so many people. I told them there was no way in hell I was apologizing. She had tried to ruin my life multiple times and deserved every bit of what she got. My husband backed me up. He told them they had no right to ask me to apologize when they had never once demanded that my stepsister apologize to me, especially considering that what she did was far worse. He even called them out for never caring about how much I had suffered after the betrayal. That led to a full-blown argument. I finally snapped and said, "If you're going to disrespect me and my husband in my own house, then get the hell out." That was 4 days ago. Since then, I haven't spoken to any of them. I do know one thing, though. None of our relatives are speaking to my stepsister anymore. She's miserable now because she's a total extrovert, and being ignored is killing her. First update. My mom is still furious about what I did. She's blaming me for ruining her daughter's life. No, seriously, that's the exact phrase she used to try and guilt-trip me. For days, she's been bombarding me with messages, demanding that I tell the family I made everything up just to get revenge on my stepsister out of jealousy. She also said that my stepsister and her husband are very upset about my actions and are considering cutting ties with me. Which is hilarious because we barely interacted in the first place, only making polite small talk at family gatherings. Honestly, the only reason I even invited her to my wedding was because my mom forced me to. Otherwise, it would have looked bad. I have no idea why my mom thinks I should apologize, but I've decided to just ignore her. For a few days, I was upset that she took my stepsister's side. But honestly, I'm used to it by now. I told my husband everything, and he thinks the best thing to do is to ignore her and move on. That's exactly what I plan to do. I'm done with them. Second update. So, it's been 2 days since my last update. I finally blocked all of them. And the moment I did, I realized just how much this whole situation had been weighing on me. I felt this overwhelming sense of relief, like I could finally breathe again. I can't believe my mom spent years forcing me to pretend to have a good relationship with my stepsister just so people wouldn't judge them for failing as parents. They couldn't raise my stepsister to be a decent person, and yet, I was the one who had to suffer for it. Anyway, I blocked them all, and I thought that would be the end of it. But last night, my mom showed up at my house. She looked so disappointed, like she expected me to feel guilty for cutting them off. After almost 5 minutes of awkward silence, she started talking about how my actions had negatively impacted the family. I cut her off right there and told her, as far as I'm concerned, I don't have a family. After she married my stepfather, it became clear that she favored my stepsister. Everything my stepsister did was forgiven, but the same rules never applied to me. I told my mother how much she had hurt me over the years and that I was done apologizing or pretending. I'd had enough. She was devastated by my words and tried to explain that she had distanced herself from me after divorcing my father because I reminded her too much of him. Which, honestly, was ridiculous. Of course, I looked like my dad. He was my father. But that was no excuse to treat me as if I wasn't her daughter. I told her I would try to understand her perspective, but I couldn't forgive her so easily. I needed time. But no matter how things went with her, I made it clear that I would never apologize to my stepsister or pretend to feel bad. My mom left after that, looking absolutely furious, but there was nothing I could do about that. A day passed, and though I unblocked her, we still haven't spoken. Third update. It's been a week since I last spoke to my mother, and she hasn't reached out since. I guess that means she doesn't regret anything, which is fine by me. Honestly, I've come to terms with the fact that she will always prefer my stepsister. Nothing I say or do will change that. But my stepsister? Oh, she has not forgiven me for what I did. Instead, she's been spreading lies about me to our relatives, painting me as the villain. She's telling everyone that the real reason her husband cheated on me was because I was a toxic, crazy psycho, and being with her made him feel safe. She even claims I was emotionally abusive, which was one of the reasons he eventually left. And, according to her, another reason for his cheating was that I pressured him into marriage when he had already told me he wasn't ready, and that scared him away. Obviously, none of this is true. But now, some of our relatives don't know who to believe because my stepsister, unlike me, is an incredibly convincing liar. One of my cousins keeps updating me on the new nonsense she's spreading, and it's infuriating to see her trying to twist the story when everyone already knows what kind of person she is. I doubt my mom will ever step in to stop her, and honestly, I'm not even going to ask. She wouldn't stand up to her precious daughter, no matter what. But I'm not letting this slide. If my stepsister is willing to stoop this low, then I can go even lower. I blocked her on every social media platform, but fortunately, I know a lot of her coworkers and friends. And now, I plan to make sure they all know what kind of person she really is. Yeah, it's petty and mean, but I don't care anymore. I've spent years pretending I didn't care about her or her bullshit, but the truth is, she never cared about me. Not once. So why should I give her any consideration? Even my husband thinks that everything I'm doing, no matter how petty or cruel, is coming from a justified place. I've had to suppress my anger toward her for so long that it was bound to explode at some point. And he thinks now is the perfect time, because she's been pushing me for a reaction for years. So I finally exposed her. I wrote down everything she had ever done to me, with proof. Screenshots of my conversations with my ex. The nasty messages she had sent me over the years. Everything. I posted it yesterday, and now my phone won't stop buzzing. People are messaging me nonstop. Not just relatives, but even my stepsister's coworkers. Some of her acquaintances even reached out to share their own awful experiences with her. Turns out, at work, she flirts with every guy, whether they're married or not. And if that wasn't bad enough, she treats other women like garbage, constantly talking behind her so-called friends' backs. So far, I've learned that she's a flirt, a gossip, and a backstabber, and the list just keeps growing. My stepsister is livid that I aired out her dirty laundry. She's desperately trying to get in touch with me, even making fake accounts to threaten me and demand that I delete the post. But she doesn't scare me, so the post stays up. I'm sure she's already reported it, and maybe Facebook will take it down eventually. But I won't do it myself. My mom is furious with me too. She keeps saying she expected me to handle this like a mature woman, and that I've embarrassed her. According to her, I've acted like a complete idiot. Oh, and my stepfather? He's pissed too. Apparently, my antics have damaged his reputation among his friends, so now he's demanding that I publicly apologize and delete my posts. And if I don't, they're threatening to cut me out of their lives completely. Which is hilarious, because I'm the one who blocked them first. Do they really think threatening to disown me is going to work? Like, I already walked away. I do not care. As for the inheritance, they're saying that if I don't apologize, my entire share will go to my stepsister. Go ahead. Give her everything. It's funny how they think I'll be heartbroken over this. Sure, I might feel a little sad that my mom refuses to speak to me. But like I said before, I've already accepted that she'll never love me the way she loves her real daughter. And I'm okay with that. As for the inheritance, I couldn't care less. My husband and I both make enough money, so we're not worried about finances. On top of that, when my dad passed away a few years ago, he left me far more than whatever my stepfather has. So honestly, losing out on their so-called inheritance doesn't bother me in the slightest. Fifth update. It's been 2 days since I posted everything, and holy shit, it's like I opened Pandora's box. First of all, my parents have completely cut me off. When I told my mom I wasn't taking the post down, she tried to convince me that losing my relationship with them wasn't worth it. That revenge on my stepsister shouldn't be my only goal in life. I reminded her that I never really had a relationship with them to begin with. So losing whatever was left? Totally worth it if it meant finally getting payback on that demonic little gremlin. That led to another argument, and by the end of it, My mom blocked me everywhere. Then, yesterday, I found out from some other relatives that my stepsister and her husband are getting divorced. I was confused. What the hell could have happened overnight? After some digging, my cousin told me that apparently, one of my stepsister's male coworkers, who had seen my post, decided to message her husband. He sent him screenshots of my stepsister trying to flirt with him. And since the guy was already married, he felt uncomfortable. Obviously, her husband did not like that. They got into a huge fight, and now, they're getting divorced. He even filed for full custody of their son. Which, honestly, is sad for the kid. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't at least a little pleased that karma finally came for them. At this point, I've completely distanced myself from the situation. I guess my stepsister finally learned her lesson because she hasn't said a word since that post went up. It's insane how one decision, just one post, completely destroyed her marriage. And maybe even her relationship with her son. But do I feel guilty? Not at all. She did this to herself. From what I've heard, she's moved back in with my parents because even her workplace has turned against her. People are judging her for her behavior, and it's only a matter of time before she gets fired. Honestly, the best part of all this? I won't have to deal with her or her drama for a long, long time. To make sure of that, my husband and I decided to leave for our honeymoon this week. We're heading on a tour across Europe, and I cannot wait. For the next few weeks, I'm going to forget all about this ridiculous family drama and just focus on enjoying my life. Hopefully, when I return, I'll feel even freer, without all the emotional baggage I've been carrying for so long. And honestly, now that I've finally cut my family out of my life, I already feel so much lighter.